What's up, YouTube family? Welcome back to another reaction video. I trust that everyone is having a wonderful day today, guys. Thank you for the love. Thank you for the support. So, guys, if you're new to the channel, I welcome you. If you're returning, welcome back. All right, so season's greetings, everyone. And today we're going to be diving into Katyn's World War II Forgotten Massacre. Well, I guess this is forgotten maybe by the rest of the world, but not to the Poles. Now, the massacre, that just refers to a mass execution, guys, of approximately 22,000 Polish military officers, you know, intellectuals and civilians, by the Soviet Union during World War II. That occurred in April and in May in 1940 in the Katyn's forest. That's near Smolensk, Russia, and in other sites. So guys, thank you very much for the information, and I would like to dive into that. I want you guys to sit back, relax, and listen to that one with me and let me know more about it if I miss out anything. Alright, so I'm excited to see how that goes. So guys, without any further ado, let's dive right in.
One really important aspect of the start of World War II is often overlooked in the retelling. Everyone knows that Germany invaded Poland on the 1st of September 1939, setting in motion the outbreak of a much bigger world war when, on the 3rd of September, Britain and France, after demanding that Hitler halt his military action, declared war on Germany, as per an agreement they had with Poland. That's the narrative of the beginning of World War II in Europe. But a fifth player is often left out of the story: the Soviet Union.
The Soviet Union.
Poland and the USSR had no love for one another. In fact, in 1919 to 21, the Poles had fought the Soviets over western Ukraine and defeated the Red Army at Warsaw. The Poles possessed a massive and well-trained army. In 1939, this amounted to 1.75 million regular troops, plus a further 500,000 in reserve. But the Polish military also had some terrible weaknesses that the Germans would exploit during their invasion, notably an over-reliance on horsed cavalry and too few modern tanks, and out-of-date artillery and fire control equipment. Its air force was also third class in comparison to the German Luftwaffe. But the Poles were very tough and determined fighters, and the Germans knew that they would have a serious fight on their hands. Hitler had a secret weapon to undermine the Poles: Stalin. In a breathtaking piece of diplomatic intrigue, Hitler concluded a non-aggression pact with the Soviet Union a few days before the invasion of Poland. Given all that Hitler had said about the Soviet Union and communism over the past 20 years, most Germans were as surprised as the Polish, British and French by this apparent double standard. The pact included a secret clause whereby, working in cooperation with the German forces invading from the west, Stalin would unleash an invasion of Poland from the east. By the 17th of September 1939, the Polish forces had been pushed back by the German blitzkrieg and started massing their remaining forces south and west of the capital, Warsaw. They also moved into a tongue of Polish territory that stuck out between Romania and Hungary, both friendly nations. The plan was to hold out until Britain and France somehow came to Poland's aid. The French, as I have covered in another video, link in the end screen, launched a rather desultory Saar offensive into a part of western Germany, which did nothing to ease the pressure on Poland, and the British conducted some limited aerial bombing in the Rhineland. But then the hammer fell. On the 17th of September, the Soviets summoned the Polish ambassador in Moscow and informed him that because the Polish government had ceased to exist, which was a lie, and in order to protect Polish citizens of Ukrainian and Belarusian descent living in eastern Poland, Soviet troops would enter the country to restore order. 35 Red Army divisions invaded, dooming the remaining part of the Polish army resisting in what was called the Romanian bridgehead against the Germans. Plenty of fighting remained, but assailed from east and west simultaneously, the conclusion was never in doubt. The very last Polish unit surrendered on the 6th of October 1939, Poland having suffered over 750,000 casualties. Large sections of eastern Poland were now under Soviet occupation. The Soviets captured some 400,000 Polish troops. Some escaped, and 42,000 of Ukrainian or Belarusian ethnicity were released. Some 125,000 were sent to camps run by Stalin's feared secret police, the NKVD. Repression began at once. Polish law had mandated that every non-exempt university graduate had to serve as a reserve officer in the military. The NKVD used this as an excuse to round up and imprison huge numbers of educated people, claiming they were military prisoners of war, seen by the Soviets as the key to Polish national identity and what they termed the intelligentsia. About 320,000 such people, including graduates, military officers, aristocrats, lawyers, doctors, police officers, and clergymen, were deported to the USSR and placed into camps. The driving force behind this persecution was the head of the NKVD, Lavrenti Beria, who had already conducted years of terror and murder against Soviet citizens. The Poles ended up in a series of camps in the western USSR. In the meantime, the
Soviet Union sought to eliminate Poland's leadership class, just to weaken the country's resistance men to the Soviet control. So I see where they were attacking first, man. All right, guys, let's continue watching.
Germans in their sector of Poland had also unleashed great repression on the Polish people. The Soviets demanded that the imprisoned Poles become pro-Soviet, most of whom refused not unreasonably to do so. Those who exhibited patriotic sentiments were labeled as enemies of the Soviet Union. A decision was now taken to start liquidating the worst of the enemies identified by Beria's NKVD. Stalin and 6 members of the governing Politburo in Moscow signed an order on the 5th of March 1940 to execute 25,700 Polish nationalists and counter-revolutionaries, as the Polish prisoners were termed. Why? The reasoning was to wipe out the core people who created and maintained Polish culture, to eradicate the people who would resist Stalin the hardest. The killings began after the 3rd of April 1940. 21,857 Polish prisoners, including 14,552 military POWs, being shot at various locations, including Katyn, near Smolensk in Russia. At Katyn, huge numbers of military officers, from generals to captains, were killed, including 14 generals, as well as 200 pilots, 20 professors, 300 doctors and surgeons, and hundreds of teachers, lawyers, engineers, writers, and journalists, up to 12,000 people. The bodies were buried in pits in the forest. And interestingly, the majority of the firearms used by the NKVD were German Walter Model 2 pistols, supplied to the Soviets by the Nazis. And that was the end of the matter as far as Beria and Stalin were concerned. The dead at Katyn were just another tragedy to add to all the bloodshed of state murder that witnessed millions of Soviet citizens put to death and the evidence hidden in mass graves all over the country. That wasn't until Hitler tore up his non-aggression pact with Stalin and invaded the Soviet Union on the 22nd of June 1941. Stalin now became an ally of Britain, transformed into kindly Uncle Joe Stalin, another victim of Hitler's insatiable lust for empire. And with the entry of the United States in the war in December 1941, the Soviet Union became the vital factor in eventual Allied victory over Germany. For the titanic struggle on the Eastern Front was tying down at any one time a good 70% of Germany's military power. It is no exaggeration to state that without the USSR's enormous sacrifice, Britain, its empire and dominions, and the United States could not have defeated Germany in Europe and simultaneously dealt with Japan in the Far East.
Right, right.
So, for the duration of the war at least, Stalin was one of the good guys, meaning that the Western liberal democracies would turn a blind eye to Stalin's rule, even though it resembled and often surpassed Hitler's Germany for oppression and murder on a grand scale. The exigencies of war created some strange bedfellows indeed. Anyway, the Polish government in exile in London naturally wanted to know what had become of its missing citizens, remembering now that the Free Polish forces raised in the United Kingdom were fighting on the same side as Uncle Joe. Interestingly, the Soviets had even signed an agreement with the Polish government in exile to create a Polish army from POWs the Soviets had taken in 1939 and held now in camps in order to help the Red Army on the Eastern Front. Stalin had a face-to-face meeting with General Sikorski, Poland's prime minister in exile, and basically explained the missing Soviet citizens as having become lost in the bureaucracy of his huge country. A sort of accounting error, but assuring Sikorski that all was well. By now, the area of Smolensk was under German occupation. The Polish Home Army, the enormous resistance organization within occupied Poland, received reports from Polish railway workers who were performing forced labor for the Nazis of secret mass graves in the Katyn forest. The Germans also got wind of this story. In March or April 1943, not long after the surrender of the 6th Army at Stalingrad, Germany's greatest Eastern Front calamity, the Germans decided to investigate. What the Germans uncovered was astounding. Almost 12,000 decomposing corpses dressed in winter uniforms with their identity documents and personal effects still present. German Propaganda Ministry Director Dr. Josef Goebbels realized the potential of the story at once. Soviet barbarism for all the world to see. He knew that such a heinous crime would shock public opinion in Britain and America, and perhaps cause a rift in the alliance with the Soviet Union, to Germany's obvious advantage. You have to remember that Katyn was investigated so thoroughly by the Germans, not out of any sympathy for the Poles. The Germans had already killed hundreds of thousands of Polish citizens by this time, carrying out massive shootings, herding hundreds of thousands of Jews into ghettos, and then shipping them east to special camps. German outrage was simply a manufactured move to sow dissension in the Allied camp. The Germans created the Katyn Commission in collaboration with the International Red Cross. The Germans wanted to make the investigation completely transparent so that they couldn't be blamed for perpetrating a cover-up of a crime that many suspected they had in fact committed. Forensic surgeons from Germany, Belgium, Bulgaria, Croatia, Denmark, Finland, France, Hungary, Italy, the Netherlands, Romania, Switzerland and Slovakia formed the Katyn Committee, the Germans even bringing in allied POW doctors and surgeons as witnesses to the exhumations, including British, American and Polish officers.
Okay.
The German press naturally had a field day. The Soviet reaction was a blanket denial. It was German propaganda. They had killed these Poles after the invasion of the USSR in 1941. General Sikorski was not dissuaded from trying to uncover the truth. Sikorski's probing caused Stalin to break off diplomatic ties with the Polish government in exile in London. Further damage to Allied relations were averted by Sikorski's extremely convenient death in a plane crash at Gibraltar on the 4th of July 1943. When the Soviets recaptured Smolensk and the Katyn forest area in October 1943, the NKVD began a massive cover-up operation. Physical evidence was destroyed, witnesses intimidated, and a Soviet commission decided that the Poles had been shot by the Germans in the late summer of 1941, while the Poles were being used for forced labor. American and British journalists generally reported that they believed the Soviet story, but some had misgivings.
Oh.
From the
So I understand what is going on there right now. So the graves were discovered by Nazi Germany in 1943 after they invaded the Soviet Union. Now, the Soviet Union attacked Poland, and then Russia from the not maybe Russia, sorry, Nazi from the other Germany from the other side. So the Soviet Union is man, that is so disturbing. Blaming Nazi for these mass graves, man. Wow. So disturbing. Alright guys, let's continue watching.
Evidence of meetings between Polish leaders and Churchill, it was clear that the British Prime Minister believed the Soviets were responsible for Katyn. But the maintenance of the alliance with the USSR in the prosecution of the war against Hitler trumped the dead Poles in the forest. British intelligence agents who tried to warn the British government about what actually happened were sidelined or removed. US POW doctors who had been present at the exhumation of the corpses at Katyn reported to the State Department that the Soviets had been responsible. They cited the following evidence. The corpses were all dressed in winter clothing, but the Soviets insisted the men had been shot in the high summer of 1941 by the Germans. No records, identification papers, or letters were found on the corpses dated later than spring 1940. The good condition of their clothes and boots indicated that they had not been prisoners for very long.
Okay.
These reports were suppressed and made top secret. Again, America needed the Soviets in the fight against Hitler. The Katyn Forest Massacre was placed on the indictment against German war crime suspects at the Nuremberg trials. The Soviets pushed hard for this, but US and British judges dismissed the charges through lack of evidence. From the 1950s to the 1980s, various attempts were made in Poland to establish the truth, but the communist regime there always quashed such attempts for obvious reasons. It was only in 1989 the Soviet academics finally admitted that Stalin had indeed ordered the Katyn massacre. In 1990, Soviet Premier Mikhail Gorbachev named the NKVD as a responsible organization for the massacres. In 1990, President Boris Yeltsin ordered the transfer of many documents pertinent to Katyn from Russia to Poland. A huge Russian investigation eventually clarified exactly what had happened, but many volumes of documents still remain classified. No one has ever stood trial for Katyn, and by now everyone involved must be dead.
Oh.
And it was only in 2010 that the Russian parliament officially admitted that Stalin and Beria were responsible for the massacres. It was the same year that the Polish president and 95 Polish politicians, high-ranking army officers and their staff were killed in a plane crash on their way to a ceremony in Russia marking the 70th anniversary of the Katyn massacre, fueling conspiracy theories that echoed those that still surround the death of Prime Minister Sikorsky in a plane crash in 1943. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and share, and also visit my audiobook channel, War Stories with Mark Felton. You can also help to support both of my channels at PayPal and Patreon. Details in the description box below.
My God, guys, that is some chilling stuff right there, you know. That is, guys, that is some chilling history right there. You know, the aftermath, you know, of the Katyn massacre, man, that just remains a highly sensitive, man, and tragic subject in Polish-Russian relations, man. My God, wow. This, and like they said, it's unforgotten. It's forgotten, but this is not forgotten by the Poles. Probably the rest of the world, but not the Poles. You know, and I have to say, this is a stark reminder of brutalities, guys. You know, and this just serves as a symbol of suffering endured by the Poland during World War II. You know, caught between the aggression of Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union. And just not only these, you know, after Nazi Germany invaded the Soviet Union, you know, the Nazis, they used the massacre for propaganda, blaming the Soviet Union, you know, and the Soviet Union still denied the responsibility and blamed Nazi. So there it was just you know, a back and forth, man. You know, I'm so glad that I dived into that. For sure, this is one I have seen for the first time and would not be forgotten. So guys, let me tell you, there is a movie out there. I would like to know if you guys want me to watch the movie and post it. I could watch it and not post it. So, you know, guys, please let me know. All right. So this is where I come to the end. Guys, sit back, relax, and see what I have coming up next, because I have some amazing content coming up for you. So stick around for that. All right. So Metal R Head says, guys, stay safe out there, share the love, and have yourselves a wonderful day. Peace out. Till next time. I love y'all.